Hello everyone, Dr. Michael Lamas here for Teaching Subjects, and today I want to guide you through one of the most critical areas of English grammar, nouns. And I also want to help you identify and overcome some of the common mistakes that learners often make. So, as you know, nouns are at the heart of any language, right? So they're the building blocks of our sentences and the cornerstones of clear communication. So, whether you're preparing for the IELTS exam or just striving to improve your academic writing or even just simply aiming to enhance your everyday conversation skills, mastering nouns is an important aspect. So, with this presentation, I carefully structured to provide you with examples, explanations, and also some practical tips. So, grab yourself a notebook and prepare any questions that you might have, and you can leave them down below in the comments section. And let's start on this journey together. So, just like with any kind of topic, let's just start with the basics. So, what are nouns? So, this fundamental question sets the stage for everything that we'll cover in this lesson. So, at its core, its noun is a word that names people, places, things, or ideas. So at its core, a noun is a word that names people, places, things, or ideas. Nouns are everywhere in our language. They help us identify what we're talking about. So whether it's a concrete object like a dog, or a specific location such as a city, or an abstract concept like happiness. Right? So for instance, a teacher represents a person. A city like New York or Tokyo is a place. A dog refers to a tangible thing, something that you can see and touch. And happiness, that's an idea. A feeling or state of being that's intangible but deeply meaningful. Nouns serve as the foundation of communication because they allow us to name and categorize the world around us. Without nouns, we couldn't point out objects, express emotions, or even talk about people. Now, why is mastering nouns so important in English? Well, for starters, understanding nouns ensures that you can construct sentences correctly. The way nouns interact with verbs, adjectives, and articles determines whether your message is clear and accurate. So, for example, consider the sentence, the teacher inspires happiness in her students. Here, nouns teacher and happiness define who and what the sentence is about. Without them, the sentence would lose its meaning entirely. So by mastering nouns, you'll elevate your writing and speaking skills, enabling you to communicate with precision, whether in casual conversation or even in formal academic settings. Okay, so now let's address one of the most common mistakes English learners make, which is misusing singular and plural nouns. And this is an area where even advanced speakers can stumble, so don't worry if you made these errors before in the past. So first, let's talk about adding an S to uncountable nouns. Uncountable nouns represent things that cannot be counted individually, such as furniture, information, or device. These words are already singular in form, and adding an S to them is incorrect. So for example, the furnitures in the room are beautiful. That's incorrect. The correct version of the sentence is the furniture in the room is beautiful. Right? So notice how we don't say furnitures. Instead, furniture remains the same regardless of quantity. If you want to express the idea of more than one piece, you can add a quantifier, such as several pieces of furniture are beautiful. So now let's move on to irregular plural forms. Now, unlike regular nouns, which simply add an S or ES to form the plural, irregular nouns change in unpredictable ways. Okay, so for instance, if we say the sentence, the childs are playing in the park, that's an incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying that sentence is, the children are playing in the park. Another example includes person becomes people, not persons, except in formal contexts. Now, mouse becomes mice, not mouses. And then foot becomes feet, not foots. Now, irregular plurals often require memorization, but they are vital for sounding natural and accurate in English. So let's look at these common errors in full sentences, right? So the incorrect way of saying this sentence, she gave me many advices, right? That's the incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying it is, she gave me some advice. Another example is, there were 3 deers in the forest. That's an incorrect way of saying that sentence. Versus the correct way of saying it is, there were 3 deer in the forest. Do you see the difference? So by recognizing these common pitfalls, you'll avoid miscommunications and sound much more fluent when you speak English. So now let's move on to another common mistake, which is confusing countable with uncountable nouns. Now, this error often arises because learners naturally try to apply the rules of their native language to English, which doesn't always work. So let's start by defining countable nouns. These are nouns that can be counted as individual units, meaning you can use numbers with them. So, for example, 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples. Countable nouns also have plural forms, which usually involves adding an s or es. So, for instance, singular for the word books. Countable nouns also have plural forms, which usually involve adding an s or an es. So, for example, book is singular, book, and then the plural form is books, which you just add the s at the end of book. On the other hand, uncountable nouns refer to things that cannot be counted as individual units. Now, these nouns typically do not have plural forms, so examples include advice, information, water, and happiness. You wouldn't say 2 advices or 3 informations, right? So instead, we use countifiers to describe the quantity of uncountable nouns. Okay, so for instance, we would say some advice or a piece of information. Now, as a quick comparison to illustrate this point, for countable, we would say 2 apples, right? In an uncountable way, we would say some water. Okay, so now let's look at some common mistakes and their corrections. So, she gave me 2 advices. This is the incorrect way of saying it, right? She gave me 2 advices. The correct way of saying it is she gave me some advice. Another example is I need an information about the event. That's the incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying it is I need some information about the event. Now, these small adjustments make a big difference in clarity and fluency. A good way to avoid confusion is to familiarize yourself with common uncountable nouns in English and pair them with the right quantifiers. So, for example, a bottle of water, a bit of luck, a lot of patience. Right? So understanding the difference between countable and uncountable nouns is important to building accurate sentences. It helps with grammar and it also ensures your meaning is precise and professional when you're speaking English. Okay, so now let's move on to the next common mistake, incorrect use of articles with nouns. Articles a, an, and the are small but mighty words in English, okay? So they play an important role in making your sentence grammatically correct. So we'll break these mistakes down into 2 main issues. One is overusing articles and the other one is omitting articles. So first let's discuss overusing articles. A common error is placing the before nouns that don't require it. So for example, the water is essential for life. Right, so this is the incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying it is just water is essential for life. In this case, water is being used as a general uncountable noun. Adding the word the makes it specific, which doesn't align with the intended meaning in that sentence. However, there are situations where the word the is appropriate. Okay, so for example, the water in this bottle is clean. Here we're talking about a specific body of water, not water in general. Okay, now let's address the opposite issue, which is omitting articles where they are needed. So for instance, I saw dog in the park. That's the incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying that sentence is I saw a dog in the park. In this sentence, dog is a singular countable noun, so it requires an article, either a or the, depending on whether it's general or a specific dog. So you might be asking yourself, so how can you choose the correct article? So there are a few tips. Number 1 is use the letter a or an when introducing a singular countable noun for the first time. An example, I saw a bird, okay? And then number 2, use the when referring to something specific or already mentioned. So for example, the bird was singing beautifully. And number 3, use no article for uncountable nouns or plural countable nouns with speaking in general terms. Okay, so for example, birds fly south for the winter. The mastering articles takes practice because their use often depends on subtle differences in meaning, but with time, you'll develop an intuitive sense for when to use a, and, the, or just no articles at all. So our next common mistake involves collective nouns. those tricky words that refer to a group of individuals but are treated as either singular or plural depending on the context. These includes nouns like team, family, audience, or committee. So one frequent mistake is treating collective nouns inconsistently, sometimes as singular, other times as plural, without considering the meaning or context. So let's look at an example, okay? The team are winning. That is the incorrect way of saying it. The correct way of saying it is the team is winning. Here we treat team as a singular unit because it's acting collectively as one entity. But there are cases where we consider the members of a group individually, which allows for plural verb usage. So for instance, the correct way of saying this one sentence is the team are arguing among themselves. Okay, so this distinction can be confusing, but is very important for clarity and grammatical accuracy. Okay, so how do you decide whether to use singular or plural verbs? So here are some helpful guidelines. Okay, so use a singular verb if the group is acting together as a single entity. So an example, the committee has made its decision. Here the committee is seen as one body making a decision. Then you could use a plural verb when the members of a group are acting separately or individually. Okay, so for example, the committee are discussing their individual opinions. In this case, the focus is on the members' separate action. It's also important to note that American and British English sometimes treat collective nouns differently. Okay, so in American English, collective nouns are usually treated as singular. So for example, the team is winning, right? Compared to British English, it's common to use a plural verb with collective nouns. So for example, the team are winning. So some tips to master collective nouns. So to avoid overgeneralizing with collective nouns, always think about the context, right? So ask yourself, is the group acting as one unit? Use a singular verb. Are the members acting individually? You use a plural verb. Okay, so now let's discuss mistake 6, which is mixing abstract and concrete nouns. Now, this mistake often arises in formal writing when we mistakenly pair or confuse abstract nouns with concrete ones. Now, creative, awkward, or unclear sentences, understanding the difference between these two types of nouns will help you to avoid this pitfall and make your writing more clear and effective. So before we discuss the common mistakes, let's first define the two types of nouns, right? So concrete nouns refer to things that you can touch, see, or experience through your sentence, right? They are tangible, physical objects. Some examples include book, table, car, or dogs. Then we have abstract nouns. Now these represent ideas, feelings, qualities, or concepts that can't be physically touched or seen, okay? So they are intangible. Examples include love, happiness, freedom, and intelligence. Now, one of the most frequent errors is incorrectly using concrete nouns when abstract nouns are needed or vice versa, especially in formal or academic writing. So here's an example of this mistake. Okay, so his love for books was book, right? So that's incorrect. The correct way of saying it is his love for books was real. Okay, so in the incorrect sentence, the concrete noun book doesn't fit the abstract concept for love. In formal writing, we need to describe feelings or concepts with words that reflect their abstract nature rather than using a concrete noun inappropriately. Okay, so let's touch on the functions of abstracts and concrete nouns in sentences and how they work together to create clarity. Okay, so abstract nouns are often used to express emotion, qualities, or states of being. In formal writing, they convey meaning that can't be physically perceived, right? So such as in the sentence, her honesty was appreciated. Okay, so here honesty is abstract, something that you can't touch or see, but you can feel or understand, right? The decision caused great joy. In this case, joy is abstract, not a physical object. In another example, the decision caused great joy. Okay, so in this case, the word joy is abstract, not a physical object. Now, concrete nouns, on the other hand, name physical things that we can see or touch. In your writing, they are used to describe the world around us. Okay, so for example, the book was on the table. Or another example, the dog ran through the park. Okay, so to avoid confusion, abstracts and concrete nouns, always ask yourself what you're really trying to convey, right? Are you describing a physical object that can be touched or seen, right? Use a concrete noun. Are you describing a feeling, concept, or quality? Then use an abstract noun. Okay, so now that we've covered some of the most common mistakes people make with nouns, from misusing singular and plural forms to mixing up abstract and concrete nouns, these errors are easily avoidable once you understand the underlying principles, right? But how can you master nouns and avoid these mistakes in your writing and speaking? So let's go over some practical tips and strategies that can help you build a stronger foundation. So the first thing that you could do is practice with real world examples, right? So one of the most effective ways to master nouns is to practice with real world examples. So rather than simply memorizing rules, apply what you learn by examining authentic content, whether it's books, articles, or conversations. Okay, so look how nouns are used in context of actual writing, such as academic papers, novels, or news articles. Okay, next you can pay attention to the different types of nouns, right? Are they being used correctly as singular, plural, countable, or uncountable? Okay, and the other thing is try rewriting sentences you encounter to experiment with different types of nouns. So, for example, change a sentence with an abstract noun to one using a concrete noun or vice versa and see how the meaning shifts. Okay, so the second tip is to read extensively or observe noun usage. Okay, so reading is an excellent way to solidify your understanding of nouns and see how they function in various contexts. So by reading, you'll reinforce the proper noun usage and you'll also start to develop a natural sense of grammar. Okay, and then you could choose a variety of material such as fiction, nonfiction books, a newspaper, academic journals is really great, and you can even go read online blogs or online forums, right? So, because each source will provide you with different styles of writing and noun usage. Now, as you read, pay special attention to how the authors use the nouns. Are there any patterns in the way they form plurals, use articles, or treat collective nouns? Okay, so this observation helps internalize correct usage without memorizing rules. So the third one is to use tools and resources, right? Because we live in such a digital age. We have many tools and resources at our disposal to help us avoid common mistakes and improve our understanding of nouns. So here's a couple few to consider, right? We have grammar checks. Tools like Grammarly or Hemingway Editor can help you spot mistakes in noun usage. They automatically identify issues with singular, plural forms, articles, and other non noun related errors. Now, while these tools are not perfect, they can give you instant feedback and help you identify patterns in your writing that need improvement. Another good thing to do is to use dictionary and thesauruses, right? So keep a good dictionary or thesaurus handy when you're writing. These are very important when you're unsure about the meaning or form of a noun, right? A dictionary will give you the definition, part of speech, and examples of a noun usage, while the thesaurus will offer synonyms and antonyms to help you diversify your language. And many online dictionaries also offer usage notes that provide additional insights into how a noun is typically used in context. Now, another thing that I don't have listed here on the PowerPoint, but I think is important is a strategy, right? Is to get feedback from others. Having someone else review your writing can highlight nouns related mistakes that you might overlook, whether it's a teacher, a friend, or a peer. Constructive feedback is pretty invaluable in refining your language skills. And then the other thing is just to be patient and consistent, right? So mastering noun usage, like any other aspect of language, takes time and practice. So don't be discouraged if you're making mistakes along the way. The key is just to be patient with yourself and also staying consistent in applying the rules. So as we wrap up on today's lesson on common mistakes with nouns, let's take a moment to review what we've learned and how you can use this knowledge to master your English skills. So first, we discussed several critical mistakes people often make with nouns. Right, we discussed misusing singular and plural forms. Remember, countable nouns take plural forms while uncountable nouns don't. We saw how mistakes like furnitures instead of furniture or childs instead of children can creep into your writing. Secondly, confusing countable and uncountable nouns, right? So we learned that some nouns like advice are uncountable and can't be made plural. So for example, saying two advices is incorrect. Some advice is the right way to express it. Next, we talked about incorrect use of articles. Articles like the word like the letter A, the word and the should be used correctly. Don't overuse them like the water is essential for life. Instead, we want to say water is essential for life. Be mindful of when articles are needed or omitted. We discussed overgeneralizing with collective nouns. So with collective nouns like team or family, remember to match the verb to the collective noun based on whether you're treating the group as a unit, singular, or as individuals, plural. Okay. Then we talked about mixing abstracts and concrete nouns. So be careful not to mix up abstract nouns like happiness with concrete nouns like book, right? So this can create confusion in your writing, as we saw in the example, his love for books was books instead of his love for books was real. So now that we reviewed, I encourage you to focus on the patterns you see when using nouns. So by recognizing the different types of nouns and the correct forms, you'll start using them more naturally and more confidently. So whether you are writing or speaking, understanding these patterns will help you communicate more clearly and accurately. Before we finish, I want to remind you to keep practicing. So the more you read, write, and speak, the more comfortable you'll become with nouns in all their forms. So keep these tips in mind and you'll notice a huge improvement in your English. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you can stay updated on more lessons like this one. We're committed to helping you reach your language learning goals, and if you have any questions, leave them down below. And with that, thanks for watching.